Should be back now, technically. Yes, okay. We're back. We're back. Perfect. Whew. Super sorry for internet crashing. I have no clue why it happened, but the important thing is that we're back. Okay. At least I hope I was able to finish reading the first part of the story without interruptions. Okay. Without hesitation, let us continue then. Now that everything is fixed. Also sorry for the noises my chair is making while I'm moving around. Okay, I'll start reading from the start again, just in case. Arthur Germain was the son of Sir Alfred Germain and a musical singer of unknown origin. When the husband and father deserted his family, the mother took the child to Germain House, where there was none left to object to her presence. She was not without notions of what a nobleman's dignity should be, and so it that her son received the best education which limited money could provide. The family resources were now sadly slender, and Germain House had fallen into woeful disrepair, but young Arthur loved the old edifice and all its contents. He was not like any other German who had ever lived, for he was a poet and a dreamer. Some of the neighboring families who had heard tales of old Sir Wade Germain's unseen Portuguese wife declared that her Latin blood must be shewing itself, but most persons merely sneered at his sensitiveness to beauty, attributing it to his music-hall mother, who was socially unrecognized. The poetic delicacy of Arthur Germain was the more remarkable because of his uncouth personal appearance. Most of the Germans had possessed a subtly-odd and repelling cast, but Arthur's case was very striking. It is hard to say just what he resembled, but his expression, his facial angle, and the length of his arms gave a thrill of repulsion to those who met him for the first time. It was the mind and character of Arthur Germain which atoned for his aspect. Gifted and learned, he took highest honors at Oxford and seemed likely to redeem the intellectual fame of his family, though of poetic rather than the scientific temperament. He planned to continue the work of his forefathers in African ethnology and antiquities, utilizing the truly wonderful those strange collection of Sir Wade. With his fanciful mind, he thought often of the prehistoric civilization in which the mad explorer had so implicitly believed, and would weave tale after tale about the silent jungle city mentioned in the latter's older notes and paragraphs. For the nebulous utterances concerning a nameless, unsuspected race of jungle hybrids, he had a peculiar feeling of mingled terror and attraction. Speculation of the possible basis of such fancy, and seeking to obtain light among the more recent data gleaned by his great-grandfather and Samuel Seton amongst the youngest. In 1911, after the death of his mother, Sir Arthur Germain determined to pursue his investigations to the utmost extent. Selling a portion of his estate to obtain the requisite money, he outfitted an expedition and sailed for the Congo, arranging with the Belgian authorities for a party of guides. He spent a year in the Kaliri country, finding data beyond the highest of his expectations. Among the Kaliris was an aged chief called Mwano, who possessed not only highly retentive memory, but a singular degree of intelligence and interest in all the legends. This ancient confirmed every tale which Jermin had heard, adding his own account of the Storm City and the White Apes as it had been told to him. According to Mwano, the Grey City and the harbor creatures were no more, having been annihilated by the warlike Nbangus many years ago. This tribe, after destroying most of the edifices and killing the live beings, had carried off the stuffed goddess which had been the object of their quest, the white ape goddess which the strange beings worshipped, and which was held by Congo tradition to be the form of one who had reigned as a princess among those beings. Just what the white ape-like creatures could have been, Mwanu had no idea. But he thought they were the builders of the ruined city. Jermaine confirmed no conjecture, but close questioning obtained a very picturesque legend of the stuffed goddess. Reisi Shido, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the family gang. How you doing, cutie? The princess, it was said, became the consort of a great white god who had come out of the west. For a long time they had reigned over the city together, but when they had a son, all three went away. Later, the god and the princess had returned, and upon the death of the princess, her divine husband had mummified the body and enshrined it in a vast house of stone, where it was worshipped. Then he had departed alone. The legend here seemed to prevent three variants. According to one story, nothing further happened, save that the stuffed goddess became a symbol of supremacy for whatever tribe might possess it. It was for this reason that the Nbangus carried it off. A second story told of the god's return and death after the feat of his enshrined wives at the feet. A third told of the return of the son, grown to manhood, or rapehood, or godhood, as the case might be, yet unconscious of his identity. Surely the imaginative blacks had made the most of whatever even might lie behind the extravagant legendary. Of the reality of the jungle city, described by old Sir Wade, Arthur Jermyn had no further doubt, and was heartily astonished when early in 1912 he came upon what was left of it. Its size must have been exaggerated, yet the stone lying about proved that it was no mere village. Just so you know, that there was a slur there that I skipped, and now I feel very uncomfortable. Ah man, Lovecraft, your stories are beautiful, but you were such a bad person in real life. Unfortunately, no carvings could be found, and the small size of expedition prevented operations towards clearing the one visible passageway that seemed to let down into the system of vaults which Sir Wade had mentioned. The white apes and the stuffed goddess were discussed with all the native chiefs of the region, but it remained for a European to improve on the data offered by Old Manu. And Verharen, Belgian agent at a trading post on the Congo, believed that he could not only locate but obtained the stuffed goddess, of which he had vaguely heard. Since the one mighty Embagus were now the submissive servants of King Albert's government, and with but little persuasion could be induced to part with the gruesome deity they had carried off. When Jermyn sailed for England, therefore, it was with the exultant probability that he would, within a few months, receive a priceless ethnological relic confirming the wildest of his great-great-great-grandfather's narratives. That is, the wildest which he had ever heard. Countrymen near Jermyn House had perhaps heard the wilder tales handed down from ancestors who had listened to Sir Wade around the tables of the Knight's Head. Okay. A little bit of water. Gabriel, thank you for the lurk. Hello Nino, how are you? I hope I won't be distracted while I read, because Lovecraft, I was thinking about it. What if I end up reading a slur by accident because I'm just going through the book without paying attention to what the words actually are? Now I'm scared. Hello Incubus, I'm fine, how are you? Sleep is unspeakable horror, nice. Oh, I just drank a sip, but I'll take another one. Hello Ellie, welcome. I just wish Lovecraft was like a nice human being. But it is what it is. We all know how we named this cat. Well, let's continue. Let's try to ignore that I might end up having to skip words. Arthur Jermyn waited very patiently for the expected box from M. Verhaeren, meanwhile studying with increased diligence the manuscript left by his mad ancestor. He began to feel closely akin to Sir Wade, and to seek relics of the latter's personal life in England, as well as of his African exploits. Oral accounts of the mysterious and secluded wife had been numerous, but no tangible relic of her stay at Jermyn House remained. Jermyn wondered what circumstance had prompted or permitted such an effacement, and decided that the husband's insanity was the prime cause. His great-great-great-grandmother, he recalled, was said to have been the daughter of a Portuguese trader in Africa. No doubt, her particular heritage and superficial knowledge of the Dark Continent had caused her to flower Sir Wade's talk of the interior, a thing which such a man would not be likely to forgive. She had died in Africa, perhaps dragged thither by a husband determined to prove what he had told. But as Jermyn indulged in these reflections, he could not but smile at their futility, a century and a half after the death of both of his strange progenitors. In June 1913, a letter arrived from M. Verhaeren telling of the finding of the stuffed goddess. It was the Poljana Verd, a most extraordinary object, an object quite beyond the power of a layman to classify. Whether it was human or simian, only a scientist could determine, and the process of determination would be greatly hampered by its imperfect condition. time and the Congo climate are not kind to mummies, especially when their preparation is as amateurish as seemed to be the case here. Around the creature's neck had been found a golden chain bearing an empty locket on which were armorial designs. No doubt some hapless traveler's keepsake taken by the Envagus and hung upon the goddess as a charm. In commenting on the contour of the mummy's face, M. Virharen suggested a whimsical comparison, or rather, expressed a humorous wonder just how it would strike his correspondent, but was too much interested scientifically to waste many words in levity. The stuffed goddess, he wrote, would arrive duly packed about a month after receipt of the letter. The boxed object was delivered at German house on the afternoon of August 3, 1913, being conveyed immediately to the large chamber which housed the collection of African specimens as arranged by Sir Robert and Arthur. What ensued can best be gathered from the tales of servants and from things and papers later examined. Are the various tales that of H. Soames, the family butler, is most simple and coherent. According to this trustworthy man, Sir Arthur Jermyn dismissed everyone from the room before opening the box, though the distant sound of hammer and chisel showed that he did not delay the operation. Nothing was heard for some time, just how long Soames cannot exactly estimate, but it was certainly less than a quarter of an hour later than the audible scream, undoubtedly in Jermyn's voice, was heard. Immediately afterward, Jermyn emerged from the room, rushing frantically towards the front of the house as if pursued by some hideous enemy. The expression on his face, a face ghastly enough in repose, was beyond description. When near the front door, he seemed to think of something and turned back in his flight, finally disappearing down the stairs of the cellar. Thank you for the follow, Agustin Taka. Welcome. The servants were utterly dumbfounded and watched at the head of the stairs, but their master did not return. A smell of oil was all that came up from the regions below. After dark, a rattling was heard at the door leading from the cellar into the courtyard, and the stable boy saw Arthur Jermyn, glistening from head to foot with oil, and redolent of the fluid, steal furtively out and vanish on the black moor surrounding the house. Then, in an exaltation of supreme horror, everyone saw the end. A spark appeared on the moor, a flame arose, and a pillar of human fire reached to the heavens. The house of Jermyn no longer existed. The reason why Arthur Jermyn charred fragments were not collected and buried lies in what was found afterward, principally the thing in the box. The stuffed goddess was a nauseous sight, withered and eaten away, but it was clearly a mummified white ape of some unknown species, less hairy than any recorded variety, and infinitely nearer mankind, quite shockingly so. Detailed description would be rather unpleasant, but too salient particular must be told, for they fit in revolting with certain notes of Sir Wade Jermyn's African expeditions and with the Congolese legends of the White God and the Ape Princess. The two particulars in question are these: the arms on the golden locket but the creature's neck were the German arms, and the joke suggestion on M of your heron, but a certain resemblance as connected with a shriveled face applied with vivid, ghastly, and a natural horror to none other than the sensitive Arthur Germain, great-great-great-grandson of Sir Wade Germain, and then unknown wife. Members of the Royal Anthropological Institute burned the thing and threw the locket into a well, and some of them do not admit that Arthur Germain ever existed. And this is the end of our first story. Our second story, which is about, I think it's, yeah, we can read another one. I can read the second story before I have to go to sleep too. But yeah, oh shit, I think I broke one of my lights by accident. I'm gonna press too hard and the plastic bended a little bit. But it's fine, it's not broken. Let me get another sip because reading out loud, it's kind of tiring for me. Having dinner at 1 AM? Oh damn. Okay, our second story. I Incubus just drank literally right now. Our second story is called Sillifies. Let us go then. In a dream, Kranes saw the sea in the valley, and the sea coast beyond, and the snowy peak overlooking the sea, and the gaily painted galleys that sail out of the harbor towards the distant regions where the sea meets the sky. In a dream, it was also that he came by his name of Kranes, for when awake, he was called by another name. Perhaps it was natural for him to dream a new name, for he was the last of his family, and alone among the indifferent million of London. So there were not many to speak to him and remind him who he had been. His money and lands were gone, and he did not care for the ways of people about him, but preferred to dream and write of his dreams. What he wrote was laughed at by those whom he shewed it, so that after a time he kept his writings to himself, and finally ceased to write. The more he withdrew from the world about him, the more wonderful became his dreams, and it would have been quite futile to try to describe them on paper. Kranes was not modern, and did not think like others who wrote, whilst they strove to strip from life its embroidered robes of myth, and to sew in naked ugliness the foul thing that is reality. Kranes sought for beauty alone. When truth and experience failed to reveal it, he sought it in fancy and illusion, and found it on his very doorstep, amid the nebulous memories of childhood tales and dreams. There are not many persons who know what wonders are open to them in the stories and visions of their youth. For when as children we listen and dream, we think but half-formed thoughts, and when as men we try to remember, we are dulled and prosaic with the poison of life. But some of us awake in the night with strange phantasm of enchanted hills and gardens, of fountains that sing in the sun, of golden cliffs overhanging, murmuring seas of plains that stretched down to sleeping cities of bronze and stone, and of shadowy companies of heroes that ride caparisoned white horses along the edges of the thick forest. And then we know that we have looked back through the ivory gates into the world of wonder which was ours before we were wise and unhappy. Kuranes came very suddenly upon his old world of childhood. He had been dreaming of the house where he was born, the great stone house covered with ivy, where 13 generations of his ancestors had lived, and where he had hoped to die. It was moonlight, and he had stolen out into the fragrant summer night, through the gardens, down the terraces, past the great oaks of the park, and along the long white road to the village. The village seemed very old, eaten away at the edge, like the moon which had commenced to wane. And Kuranes wondered whether the peaked roofs of the small houses hid sleep or death. In the streets were spears of long grass, and the window panes on either side were either broken or filmily staring. Kuranes had not lingered, but had plopped on as though summoned towards some goal. He dared not disobey the summons for fear it might prove an illusion like the urges and aspirations of waking life, which do not lead to any goal. Then he had been drawn down a lane that led off from the village street toward the channel cliffs, and had come to the end of things, to the precipice and the abyss where the village and the world fell abruptly into the unechoing emptiness of infinity, and where even the sky ahead was empty and unlit by the crumbling moon and the peering stars. Fate had urged him on over the precipice and into the gulf, where he had floated down, past dark, shapeless, undreamed dreams, faintly glowing spheres that may have been partly dreamed dreams, and laughing winged things that seemed to mock the dreamers of the world. Then a rift seemed to open in the darkness before him, and he saw the city of the valley, glistening radiantly far, far below, with a background of sea and sky, and the snow-capped mountain near the shore. Kuranes had awakened the very moment he beheld the city. Yet he knew from his brief glance that it was none other than Selephais, in the valley of Uth-Nargai, beyond the Tanarian hills, where his spirit had dwelt all the eternity of an hour one summer afternoon very long ago, when he had slipped away from his nurse and let the warm sea breeze lull him to sleep as he watched the clouds from the cliff near the village. He had protested then, when they had found him, waked him, and carried him home. For just as he was aroused, he had been about to sail in the golden galley for those alluring regions where the sea meets the sky. And now he was equally resentful of awaking, for he had found his fabulous city after 40 weary years. But 3 nights afterwards, Kuranes came again to Selephais. As before, he dreamed first of the village that was asleep or dead, and of the abyss down which one must float silently. Then the rift appeared again, and he beheld the glittering minarets of the city, and saw the graceful galleys riding at anchor in the blue harbour, and watched the ginkgo trees of Mount Aran swaying in the sea breeze. But this time he was not snatched away, and like a winged being, settled gradually over a grassy hillside, till finally his feet rested gently on the turf. He had indeed come back to the valley of Uthnargai and the splendid city of Salaphais. Down the hill amid the scented grasses and brilliant flowers walked Kuranes, or the bubbling Naraksa, on the small wooden bridge where he had carved his name so many years ago, and through the whispering grove to the great stone bridge by the city gate. All was as of old, nor were the marble walls discolored, nor the polished bronze statues upon them tarnished, and Kuranes so that he need not tremble lest the thing he knew be vanished, for even the sentries on the ramparts were the same, and still as young as he remembered them. When he entered the city, past the bronze gate and over the onyx pavements, the merchants and camel drivers greeted him, as if he had never been away. And it was the same at the turquoise temple of Nath Orthath, where the orchid-wreathed priests told him that there is no time in Uthnargai, but only perpetual youth. Then Kuranes walked through the street of pillars to the seaward wall, where he gathered the traders and sailors, and strange men from the regions where the sea meets the sky. Sorry, little burp. There he stayed long, gazing out over the bright harbor where the ripples sparkled beneath an unknown sun, and where rode lightly the galleys from far places over the water, and he gazed also upon Mount Rang rising regally from the shore, its lower slopes green with swing trees, and its white summit touching the sky. More than ever Kuranes wished to sail in a galley to the far places of which he had heard so many strange tales, and he sought again the captain who had agreed to carry him so long ago. He found a man, Athib, sitting on the same chest of spices he had sat upon before, and Athib seemed not to realize that any time had passed. Then the two rowed to a galley in the harbor, and giving orders to the oarsmen, commenced to sail out into the billows Cenarian Sea that leads to the sky. For several days they glided undulatingly over the water, till finally they came to the horizon, where the sea met the sky. Here the galley paused not at all, but floated easily in the blue of the sky among fleecy clouds tinted with rose. And far beneath the keel Kuranes could see the strange lands and rivers and cities of surpassing beauty, spread indolently in the sunshine, which seemed never to lessen or disappear. At length Athib told him that their journey was near its end, and that they would soon enter the harbor of Seranian, the pink marble city of the clouds, which is built on that ethereal coast where the west winds flows into the sky. But at the highest of the city's carven towers came into sight, there was a sound somewhere in space, and Kuranes awakened in his London garret. For many months after that, Kuranes sought the marvelous city of Salaphais and its skybound galleys in vain. And though his dreams carried him to many gorgeous and unheard of places, no one whom he met could tell him how to find Uthnargai beyond the Tanarian hills. One night he went flying over dark mountains where there were faint, lone campfires at great distances apart, and strange, shaggy herds with tinkling bells on the ladders. And in the wildest part of this hilly country, so remote a few men could ever have seen it, he found a hideously ancient wall or causeway of stone zigzagging along the ridges and valleys, too gigantic ever to have risen by human hands, and of such a length that neither end of it could be seen. Beyond the wall, in the grey dawn, he came to a land of quaint gardens and cherry trees. And when the sun rose, he beheld such a beauty of red and white flowers, green foliage and lawns, white paths, diamond brooks, blue lakelets, carven bridges, and red-roofed pagodas, that he for a moment forgot Celiphae in sheer delight. But he remembered it again when he walked down a white path toward a red-roofed pagoda, and would have questioned the people of the land about it had he not found that there were no people there, but only birds and bees and butterflies. On another night, Kuranes walked up a damp stone spiral stairway endlessly, and came to a tower window overlooking a mighty plain and river lit by the full moon, and in the silent city that spread away from the river bank, he thought he beheld some feature of arrangement which he had known before. He would have descended and asked the way to Uthnargai had not a fearsome aurora sputtered upon from some remote place beyond the horizon, seeing the ruin and antiquity of the city, and the stagnation of the reedy river, and the death lying upon the land, as it had lain since King Kinaratolis came home from his conquest to find the vengeance of the gods. So Kuranes sought fruitlessly for the marvelous city of Celiphae and its galleys that sailed to Seranian in the sky, meanwhile seeing many wonders, and once barely escaping from the high priest not to be described, which wears a yellow silken mask over its face and dwells all alone in a prehistoric stone monastery on the cold desert plateau of Leng. In time, he grew so impatient of the bleak intervals of day that he began buying drugs in order to increase his periods of sleep. Hashish helped a great deal, and once sent him to a part of space where form does not exist, but where glowing gases studied the secrets of existence. And the violet-colored gas told him that this part of space was outside what he had called infinity. The gas had not heard of planets and organisms before, but identified Kuranes merely as one from the infinity where matter, energy, and gravitation exist. Kuranes was now very anxious to return to minaret-studded Celiphae and increase his doses of drugs. But eventually he had no more money left and could buy no drugs. Then one summer day he was turned out of his garret and wandered aimlessly through the streets, drifting over a bridge to a place where the houses grew thinner and thinner. And it was there that fulfillment came, and he met the cortege of knights come from Celiphae to bear him thither forever. Oh, Techno! Thank you for the raid! Welcome! Hello, He-Hope! Welcome, welcome. Let me shut you out. Yes, it's been long. I am reading Lovecraft stories tonight during this ASMR stream. We almost finished the second story of today. I wonder if there will be time for the third one. Yeah, we can read the third one today. That's great. Handsome knights they were, estrade-roan horses and clad in shiny armor, with tabards of cloth of gold curiously emblazoned. So numerous were they that Kuranes almost mistook them for an army, but their leader told him they were sent in his honor, since it was he who had created Uthnargai in his dreams, on which account he was now to be appointed its chief god forevermore. Then they gave Kuranes a horse and placed him at the head of the cavalcade, and all rode majestically through the towns of Surrey and onward towards the region where Kuranes and his ancestors were born. It was very strange, but as the riders went on, they seemed to gallop back through time, for wherever they passed through a village in the twilight, they saw only such houses and villages as Kushar or men before him might have seen, and sometimes they saw knights on horseback with small companies of retainers. Alpha Cookie, thank you for the follow. Welcome to the Vampire Gang. Oh, nice. How did your Mario Kart game go, Techno? When it grew dark, they traveled more softly, till soon they were flying uncannily, as if in the air. In a dim dawn, they came upon the village which Kuranes had seen alive in his childhood, and asleep or dead in his dreams. It was alive now, and the villagers courtesied as the horsemen clattered down the streets and turned off into the lane that ends in the abyss of dream. Kuranes had previously entered that abyss only at night and wondered what it would look like by day. So he watched anxiously as the column approached its brink. Just as they galloped up the rising ground to the precipice, a golden glare came somewhere out of the east and hid all the landscape in its effulgent draperies. The abyss was now a seething chaos of roseate and cerulean splendor, and the invisible voices sang exultantly as the nightly entourage plunged over the edge and floated gracefully down the past glittering clouds and silvery corrugations. Endlessly down the horsemen floated, their chargers spawning the ether as if galloping over golden sands, and then the luminous vapor spread apart to reveal a greater brightness. The brightness of the city of Siliphice and the sea coast beyond, and the snowy peak overlooking the sea, and the gaily painted galleys that sail out of the harbor towards distant regions where the sea meets the sky. And Kuranes reigned thereafter over Uthnargai and all the neighboring regions of Dream, and held his court alternately in his Siliphice and in the cloud-fashioned Seranian. He reigns there still, and would reign happily forever, though below the cliffs at his mouth the channel tides played mockingly with the body of a tramp who had stumbled through the half-deserted village at dawn, played mockingly, and cast it upon the rocks by ivy-covered Trevor Towers, where notably fat and especially offensive millionaire brewer enjoys the purchased atmosphere of extinct nobility. Don't bully, biggest I've ever heard of the mouth. I'll go ahead and leave a lurk while I go get food. Thank you for the lurk and thank you again for the read. Get some snackies. Okay, we're at our last story for today, which is Nyarlathotep. It's pretty short, so no worries. After that, I will go to bed. Nyarlathotep. The crawling cows. I am the last. I will tell the audient void. I do not recall distinctly when it began, but it was months ago. The general tension was horrible. to a season of political and social upheaval was added a strange and brooding apprehension of hideous physical danger, a danger widespread and all-embracing, such a danger as may be imagined only in the most terrible phantasm of the night. I recall that the people went about with pale and worried faces, and whispered warnings and prophecies which no one dared consciously repeat or acknowledge to himself that he had heard. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out of the abysses between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. There was a demoniac alteration in the sequence of the seasons. The autumn heat lingered fearsomely, and everyone felt that the world, perhaps the universe, had passed from the control of known gods of forces to that of god of forces which were unknown. And it was then that Nyarlathotep came out of Egypt. Who he was, none could tell. But he was the old native blood and looked like a pharaoh. The Fellahin knelt when they saw him. Yet he could not see why. He said he had risen up out of the blackness of 27 centuries, and that he had heard messages from places not on this planet. Into the lands of civilization came Nyarlathotep, swarthy, slender, and sinister, always buying strange instruments of glass and metal and combining them into instruments of yet stranger. He spoke much of the sciences, of electricity and psychology, and gave exhibitions of power which sent his spectators away speechless, yet which swelled his fame to exceeding magnitude. Men advised one another to see Nyarlathotep, and shuddered, and where Nyarlathotep went, rest vanished, for the small hours were rent with the screams of nightmare. Never before had the screams of nightmare been such a public problem. Now the wise men almost wished they could forbid sleep in the small hours, that the shrieks of cities might less horribly disturb the pale, beating moon as he glimmered on green waters gliding under bridges, and all the steeples crumbling against the sickly sky. Let me get a sip of water. I remember where Nyarlathotep came to my city, the great, the old, the terrible city of unnumbered crimes. My friend had told me of him, and on the impelling fascination and allurement of his revelations, and I burned with the eagerness to explore his uttermost mysteries. My friend said that they were horrible and impressive beyond my most fevered imaginings. That what was thrown on the screen in the darkened room prophesied things none but Nyarlathotep dared prophesy, and that in the sputter of his sparks there was taken from men that which had never been taken before, yet which shewed only in the eyes. And I heard it hinted abroad that those who knew Nyarlathotep looked on sights which others saw not. Thank you for reminding me to stretch it. It was in the hot autumn that I went through the night which the restless crowd to see Nyarlathotep. Through the stifling night and up the endless stairs into the choking room. And shadowed on the screen, I saw hooded forms amidst ruins, and yellow evil faces peering from behind fallen monuments, and I saw the world battling against blackness, against the waves of destruction from ultimate space, whirling, churning, struggling around dimming, cooling sun. Then the sparks played amazingly around the heads of the spectators, and hair stood up on the end, whilst shadows more grotesque than I can tell came out and squattered on the heads. And when I, who was colder and more scientific than the rest, mumbled a trembling protest about imposture and static electricity, Nyarlathotep drove us all out, down the dizzy stairs, into the damp, hot, desert midnight street. I screamed aloud that I was not afraid, that I never could be afraid, and others screamed with me for solace. He swore to one another that the city was exactly the same and still alive. Wait, I lost my point. Still alive, and when the electric lights began to fade, we cursed to the company over and over again, and laughed at the queer faces he made. I believe we felt something coming down from the greenish moon, for when we began to depend on his light, we drifted into curious involuntary formations, and seemed to know our destination, though we dared not to think of them. Once we looked at the pavement and found the blocks loose and displaced by grass, with scarce a line of grass and metal to show where the tramways had run. And again we saw a tramcar, lone, windowless, dilapidated, and almost on its side. When we gazed around the horizon, we could not find the third tower by the river, and noticed that the silhouette of the second tower was ragged at the top. When we split up into narrow columns, each of which seemed drawn in a different direction. One disappeared in a narrow alley to the left, leaving only the echo of a shocking moan. Another filed down a weed-choked subway entrance, howling with a laughter that was mad. My own column was sucked towards the open country, and presently felt a chill which was not of the hot autumn. For as we stalked out on the dark moon, we beheld around us the hellish moon glitter of evil snows. Trackless, inexplicable snows, swept asunder in one direction only, where lay a gulf all the blacker from its glittering walls. The column seemed very thin indeed, as it plotted dreamily into the gulf. I lingered behind, for the black rift in the ground-littered snow was frightful, and I thought I'd heard the reverberations of disquieting wails as my companions vanished, but my power to linger was light. As if beckoned by those who had gone before, I half floated between the titanic snowdrifts, quivering and afraid, into the sightless vortex of the unimaginable. Screamingly sentient, dumbly delirious, only the gods that were can tell. A sickened, sensitive shadow writhing in hands that are not hands, and whirled blindly past the ghastly midnights of rotting creation, corpses of dead worlds with swords that were cities, charnel winds that brush the pallid stars and make them flicker low. Beyond the words, the ghosts of monstrous things, half-seen columns of unsanctified temples, and rest on nameless rocks beneath the space, and reach up to dizzy vacua above the spheres of light and darkness. And through this revolting graveyard of the universe, the muffled, maddening beating of drums and thin, monotonous whine of blasphemous flutes from inconceivable, unlighted chambers beyond time. The detestable pounding and piping, whereunto dance slowly, awkwardly, and absurdly the gigantic, tenebrous, ultimate gods, the blind, voiceless, mindless gargoyles whose soul is Nyarlathotep. And our story ends here. And so does the live stream, I believe. Okay, let me move and adjust my microphone. Okay. It's time for me to go. Streamed a little bit more than what I expected. But we can read someone. Let me see. Okay, we can read Sukukatsu. She is doing ASMR. Their model is very cute. I hope you had fun, guys. Here is the read message. Here are my socials if you want to follow me elsewhere, and here's my Discord if you want to join. Thank you so much, guys, for coming today. Tomorrow evening, or still at midnight, we'll do some Overwatch ASMR, where I will flame my teammates, probably, because I am not a good person. I'll be nice, I promise I'll be nice. But thank you so much again for being here, and I hope to see you next time. Now let's go. Let's read the Sukukatsu. Thank you again. I love you all. Get some kisses.